Alrighty, welcome to Authenticity with Alicia, the podcast where we explore burnout, the pressures of society, and our quest for identity and authenticity. I'm Alicia, and today we are joined by Julie Lindroth, who is a licensed social worker, supervisor, and who's passionate about ethics from some personal experiences and now gets to help others and does lots of training. So I'm very excited to have this chat. Thank you for joining us today. Oh, is your audio working?
So, see, is
Oh,
it
I can hear
working?
you now.
I can
Yeah,
hear me
I
now?
just
Okay.
was like, oh, before we're getting into the good stuff, we did a tech check and everything. I promise, guys, we're just being authentic this morning. So you've had a journey with some ethics things.
Yeah.
So whatever you're comfortable sharing, can you just tell us what your experience has been like with the term ethics?
I it's this is my first podcast, so it's nervous to tell about that. But
Yeah.
because I work in family services and I've been to
Mhm.
family court, I have had three experiences with the Board of Social Work Examiners in
Wow.
South Carolina.
Mhm.
And the ethics are more about like know what you're doing, like know what they are. I should have known, but I didn't really pay attention. And that's the honest part, that you shouldn't text somebody. You got to make sure that people aren't your friends.
Yeah.
Like your clients are not your friends. If you're going to text them, it has to be encrypted, it has to be appropriate. And they can't call you at all times of the day and night, and because I got into situations where I've been innocent every time, right? But because one parent gets upset
Mhm.
with decisions that you're a part of, then they call up the board and they say, so we don't like what she did. And
Mhm.
then you have an investigation. And I've had three of them.
Jeez. That's
One one was because I was did an intake, and see, this is how easy it can happen, right? I did an intake for a gentleman who was dual diagnosed with alcoholism. I have a family history of my father being an alcoholic.
mhm.
So I don't see alcoholics. I don't see drug addicts. If it's dual diagnosis, I can do it. But if it's the primary diagnosis, I'm not treating that.
Mhm.
And I make it really clear. And I referred this man to a drug and alcohol center. And he came back and he was like, I get to come and see you. And I said, no,
Mhm.
I no, you don't. I referred you here. It would be called something called double dipping, which would
Mhm.
mean doing two counselors at the same time. So he ended up getting angry and throwing me against
Mm.
the wall in front of the staff, and then wrote a report to the board that we did not give him his medication and that I could not make the decision not to see him, that he decided that I was the right one. So when I say you have to know your ethics, you really have to know them, because I knew that I didn't have to see him. I knew that I could do the intake, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter what you do, you can still get reported and they'll still investigate it.
Right. So yeah, I just want to slow this down for folks because yeah, we're throwing lots of ethics terms around. So I think one important thing that I'm hearing too is like for folks who've never taken, I mean, if you're in the therapy world, you've taken an ethics course, but ethics are different than laws. So laws tend to be very like specific, black and
Mhm.
white. Our ethics and each board, each state, each license, they all have their own. They are very messy. And what I'm hearing though, and sometimes ethics compete with each other.
Absolutely.
And so what I'm hearing when you're talking, and again, like I have a different license than you, so I may be completely off.
Right.
But one of my ethics in the LMFT world is like competency and knowing like countertransference type stuff. So if
Mhm.
I'm having something from my personal world showing up saying, hey, this might actually impact my ability to do the best quality of care with you. And I
Absolutely.
know there's other people out there who are going to be able to give you good care. It's actually the most ethical thing to
Mhm.
refer out so that that client can get the best care. And that's what I
Absolutely.
hear you doing in that specific example. Now, this
Absolutely.
other person, I mean, they don't know all of our ethics and they have their own emotions and their own reactions and
Mhm.
stuff. They're kind of using ethics against you now and saying,
Yes.
I'm angry and now I have the right, because everyone has the right to report us to our boards. And you had to go basically tell your story to all these people with your license on the line.
Mhm.
Oh my
Absolutely.
gosh.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that sounds so stressful, and sounds like thankfully, I mean, like you said, you knew what you were doing. You knew that
Mhm.
you were following the rules, following the ethics, but I'm sure that was still a terrifying. Because I mean, like, you know, but these people at the board don't know what you're doing, right? Like, they're seeing a written report, my guesses, or maybe an interview, and that sounds so terrifying.
They get the report from in South Carolina because it's different everywhere, but there's
Mm,
kind of a baseline. So they get the report that this has happened. They get the report and they investigate it. Then they come to you and they say, "You tell me what happened."
mm,
And then you get an investigator who makes a decision after so much time
yeah.
whether or not you're going to lose your license, whether you're going to have a reprimand, whether you're going to be have a public reprimand, what's going to happen. And I talked to somebody else who in South Carolina, and this is a good thing that they do, right? In South Carolina, they do not publish that you're being investigated. Like
Mm,
after you're investigated, if they find something, okay. If they find that there's no fault, then
mhm.
it doesn't go anywhere and your license stays in good standing.
Good.
But I talked to somebody recently on on Facebook that said that when they're investigated in another state, that they asked the person if you want to publish that you requested this person be investigated, and they said yes. So that opens up a whole nother
Wow.
door of fear and
Yeah.
terror, right? Because you have this person who says, "Yeah, I don't like what you did, so
Mhm.
I'm going to publish to the whole world that we're investigating you."
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's so terrifying. And, for a lot of us, practices like the mental health fields are pretty small in a lot of these communities. I lived in Oklahoma for 6 years, and it's like that circle is not very big. We kind of knew everyone to some extent, even if it wasn't super personal. It's like, oh, like I've heard of this person. And so if these reports are public and like it's not, there's no truth to it or it's unfounded or things like that, that can really impact someone's reputation.
And you have to know, like, I was talking to a friend of mine, she was actually my supervisee, and she was at an event. I wasn't there, and she said that somebody was upset because they didn't provide a referral. So they got
Mm,
reported to the board. I mean,
mhm,
it's little things like that, right?
mhm.
Like, oh, I didn't provide a referral, or so I always make sure that if you discharge somebody, you just give a referral out. You
Yeah,
just say, hey, you can go here, because then it can come back and bite you. Those are the things that when we first started talking that I didn't even think about.
right.
You know, I can't work with you anymore. You no longer, like we were talking, it no longer fits where I'm working in my
Mhm,
area. You've gone beyond me, or I can't help you, or
mhm,
this is an issue, or I want to refer you to somebody else. We've done all we can do.
mhm.
But if they say no, I don't need a referral, and you say, okay, I discharge you and you can go find somebody and this is what you can do, then you can get in trouble for that.
Yeah. So how do folks protect themselves in those situations?
If you well, consultation with everybody, like, I have this person that I supervised, we meet once a month.
Mhm,
We don't have a really good support group here where I'm living in South
mm,
Carolina, so we meet once a month and we talk, and we say,
yeah.
"Hey, this happened. Hey, this happened. What do you think?" And I have my people that I'll say, "Hey, this is going on," and so, for example, when my friend told me about the referral, then I backtrack and go, "Okay, did I provide a referral? Did I do
Mm,
that? Did I do that? Did I do that?" So protecting yourself is knowing your ethics, whatever they are. Um, and when in doubt, or if it feels icky, or you're not sure, or things even working with your clients seem to change and you're like, oh, this isn't going good, this doesn't feel like it felt before, stop and talk to someone and say,
mm,
hey, this is going on, what should I do?
mhm.
Because when you go for a board complaint, do you know that they'll ask you, who did you consult with?
Yeah. I believe it. And I
They
think a lot
always
of
ask.
us, I mean, I can speak for myself, I work at home, I run a private practice, so it's very easy to isolate and kind of do things on my own. And also like consultation isn't breaching confidentiality, we're not disclosing, identified information, but it's still important to say like, hey, these things are going on because it's easy for us to maybe just not know something, to not think of something. We've got our own stuff going on. And so that consultation piece seems so important to just really slow that process down, hear other thoughts, and try to make that best decision.
I have several people in my circle that do different things. So I have a really good friend who's a family court attorney.
Mhm,
I have a really good friend who's a psychologist.
mhm.
I have a really good friend who's also an LISW. I have good friends that are LPCs and LMFTs. So I don't say, oh, I'm just associating with an LISW because we have all different visions
Mhm.
and we have different worlds. But at the end of the day, we all are going for the same goal.
Yeah.
And somebody may have something in their ethics or their laws that aren't exactly the same as mine, but I might say, oh, that's something I need,
Right.
or that makes more sense. Like, for example, social workers, was it 3 years ago? 4 years ago, made one of their ethics is to have self-care.
Mm,
Now, for me, I didn't think about self-care as an ethical
mhm,
principle, honestly. You think about ethics like how do you do something, or whether you're honest, or whether you're putting forth the client, or whatever.
right.
But I didn't think about self-care, Alicia, as being part of my ethical
Yeah.
values.
That's
And it's
genius though.
actually,
Yeah.
but it is, and it's actually been made into an NASW
Mm.
principle so that you can say she's not providing self-care, because self-care, not lack of self-care, leads to burnout.
Yep. And then impacts our ability to be there for our clients and give them that quality of care. So it makes total sense.
But that's, yeah, exactly. But that's what I mean when I say, like, you're an LMFT, and I might
Hmm.
come to you and say, hey, I don't know what I'm doing with this client, and you might say, have you practiced self-care
Hmm.
lately, Julie? Oh, wait, no, because that sometimes gets to the bottom of the list, right? And it's just like, wow. Or the other thing that got me in trouble, honestly, was that I texted.
Hmm.
And there is a whole nother ethical principle about electronics.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, I didn't always pay attention to it, because I was like, oh yeah, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. And you don't think about how that's so easy to get in.
Yeah.
So especially if a teenager says, hey, how's my appointment? Are you having a good day? And I'm like, well, it's not about me, but how's your day? And then all of a sudden you have
Hmm.
stuff that you can't have in a text message
Hmm.
because it's not encrypted, right?
Yeah.
Those are the things that I don't always think about as being ethical, to
Hmm.
be honest. And those are the things that when you say, how do you protect yourself, that I'm trying to teach, because I've been a social worker. I graduated in 1986 with my MSW.
Hmm.
So I've been around a long time, right?
Hmm.
And I'm telling you that things have changed, but I want to help my colleagues who are younger than I am or haven't been in the field as long to say, these are things I didn't pay attention to.
Well, I
And
imagine too, like the landscape has changed a lot. Whereas,
yeah,
like, I can imagine in the 90s, it probably wasn't as common to text around,
well, no, we didn't
appointment
have it.
reminders or things. Whereas nowadays, like everyone is glued to our phones. And I know my EHR or my, my system that I use to run my practice, it sends out text reminders. So like a client could easily be like, oh, and they don't know that that's not me sending that. They think that, and so I can totally see how that line quickly is like, hey, I just got this text about an appointment. Can we reschedule? And then that can go down a really slippery slope. And maybe the ethics just
Absolutely.
haven't caught up with that yet of like, we live in a digital world. Instead of just saying this black and white, don't do it or do it, well, how can we do that ethically?
I had to sign for it. I mean,
Yeah.
I had to sign a paper that said, these are the new ethics, and do you promise to abide by them?
Yeah.
And because I belong to NASW, I
Hmm.
had to sign it. And so they have it on record that,
Hmm.
yes, I signed it. So then it becomes your responsibility to know what it is, right?
Hmm. Right. I remember in my ethics class, it was like well, I didn't know this was a thing. Like that excuse doesn't really get you
Right, it
anywhere.
doesn't count. And then you signed it, so you signed basically your word
Yeah.
that you were going to follow this new set of ethics. And then you're kind of like, yeah, well, everybody's doing it, right?
Yeah.
And so, and that's what the everybody's doing it, that's where it gets you in trouble.
Yeah. And I see
And
that all the time on the Facebook groups, which I think, like, I don't know your thoughts on it, but people going to a Facebook group to talk about ethics, I'm like, y'all, like, go to a
yeah,
consult group. Because again, everyone lives in different states. So we all have
yep,
different laws there. We all have
yep,
different licenses. So even you and I, even though I think, like, I'd say we both are pretty ethical people, we have different codes, different things that we need to consider.
absolutely.
And so if I just make this blanket statement of, oh, well, you're doing something unethical, or this is what I do, that might not actually protect you. And
Right,
so we need to
exactly.
consult, and it's still good to, like, like, we can still, like I said, talk about self-care and stuff and those generalizations. But if my license is on the line, I'm going to consult with someone who has a similar license that to me and who knows my state and federal laws and rules. These Facebook groups be wild sometimes.
That's interesting you bring that up because I am licensed in Florida as a telehealth.
Hmm.
I will be licensed in Mississippi for one client. I have
Hmm.
one client in Florida
Hmm.
because dad's in the army.
Hmm.
We'll have one client in Mississippi because dad's in the Air Force and is a single parent.
Yeah.
So I have to look when I do that, and funny you should mention that, I have to then go into Mississippi and say, okay, what are your laws? And I noticed like this, so I'm going to be super careful in Mississippi that they say in their paperwork they can hire a PI
Mm.
if you're being investigated.
Wow.
Just do everything right.
Oh my
I
God.
don't need a PI following me because I mean, South Carolina is tough, but they're pretty flexible. I don't have a PI following me
No,
around,
that's terrifying.
but that's what it said in their paperwork.
Wow.
So I will have that one client. He's a 10-year-old boy. I already called Mississippi. It's real easy to do. They're
Mhm.
like, yes, but you also have to know what are their rules, what are their ethics,
Mhm.
and when are their licenses up?
Mhm.
Because I don't know how people do it who have 10 licenses in 10 different
Yeah.
states.
It's so much to
So,
juggle. Yeah, because I mean, yeah, I mean, working with kids as well, it's like we have to know the different rules around breaking confidentiality,
mhm,
safety things, age of consent, just those different laws. And so it can be a lot to manage. And again, it's like it's understandable where we're busy. Some people have a lot of high caseloads.
mhm.
Maybe have a high, just like intensity of a caseload. And so it's easy for us to maybe not think, oh, I really need to, like, do this due diligence and call this and double check on this, or let me reread. I mean, and these things are not, like, in layman's terms either. Like, they are the most, like,
Well, they're
complicated things.
absolutely.
And so it's easy then to be like, oh, well, I just, like, didn't even think to look up the rules around what is considered abuse in this state, or what a mandated reporter is in this state, and then we can get in trouble for that.
Exactly.
Ugh.
Exactly.
So definitely, definitely doing the due diligence there, consulting. For me, it's documenting everything. That was
Everything.
my supervisor was my ethics teacher was actually on the board, and he's like, if you don't document it, it didn't happen. So you can't say, oh, but I
Absolutely.
did this. And so it's like, document everything. That's how we're going to be
Mhm.
able to protect ourselves. Um, I like all these things of just, talking to even similar people than us, but also different people than us. I'm also curious, how do we minimize the shame around talking about ethics? Because there's a lot of fear there. It's our license on the line, it's our reputation. But I also think a lot of people are afraid to admit, oops, maybe I did this, or I didn't know about this. And, it doesn't mean that you're a bad person or you're a bad therapist. So how do we navigate that?
So I think that the shame comes from, and I'm the good person to ask because I really went into a hole. I
Hmm.
really felt so embarrassed and ashamed. And it was interesting. I had a mentor who actually put one of the complaints on Google My Business, and she asked permission to share it. And what happened was that my colleagues said, this is not about you.
Mm-mm.
And that was a turning point for me
Mm.
when Joe did that. Joe Muirhead did that. She said, here, put it out there in a group of my colleagues in a closed group. And she said, do I have your permission to do this? And I said, yes, because at that time she was my coach.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know what was going to happen, right?
Mm.
And I got responses like, you didn't do this.
Mm.
This is clearly somebody who's hurting.
Mm.
This is clearly somebody who's trying to throw shame,
Yeah.
trying to throw blame. And when that happened, it was my 180, right? It was like, okay, I can stand and hold my head up, because I had people around me who were telling me I could hold my head up, my friends, my colleagues, but these are people that were only in our group on the web, right? This was a closed private group that we were having. And what I learned from that is telling people, you're going to feel the shame. It's not something that you're not going to feel, but 99% of the time you didn't do a mistake.
Right.
You didn't mess up,
Mm-hmm.
and they are hurting, and you're taking their hurt on. So that's what I have to say that I learned is go to people and be willing to share it with people. It's easier to share with people you don't know. Honestly, that's what I found out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's easier to because people that know me, I feel like I disappointed them. I feel like they took on my shame, right? I felt like everybody was embarrassed for me. And that isn't how they felt. But I wasn't, because I knew them too well, I wasn't willing or able maybe to say that's not the right perception.
Right.
But doing it in a group of people and have a coach or have somebody that's willing to put you out there and just say, and she didn't even say what my name was. She didn't do that. She just put it out there and said, look at this. I knew it was me. She knew it was me.
Yeah.
So that took away a lot of the shame too. And I would say that if you can do that, if you can find somebody that you trust that's a coach or a mentor and say, help me share this, like, sort of anonymously,
Yeah.
and get results. And I was terrified. I was like, oh my gosh, this
I
is
was like,
just
that
gonna be
is
fun.
so vulnerable. Like, cause yeah,
I
you're
was
going
so
through your own
vulnerable,
emotions, right? And to
but
put yourself out there like that.
yeah, it was vulnerable, but she allowed anonymity to be in it. So in the group, the responses were like, oh my gosh, can't you see that this guy just really didn't appreciate what she did, or he's hurting for her, or whatever. And I think that if we can have people that can do that for us and use the internet that way, that's a way to promote healing, because you're not doing healing with people who mean a lot to you. Because if they're people who mean a lot to you, and I'm including my mother or my brother or my sister or my best friend, right? I'm thinking, oh yeah, you have to say that.
I was just about to say, like, I love when we have like our tight knit folks, but yeah, it's like if we're in that dark space, our brain's gonna be like, well, no, that doesn't count. Like they love me, they don't want me to hurt, they're gonna say whatever. These random people on the internet that don't know it's you, they don't owe you
Right.
anything. And so yeah, it's
So,
using that in a good, powerful way.
and so when she did that, then my life actually started to change, because I no longer dug myself in the sand. I started having so many different things happening that are continuing to happen. And I started speaking out about these experiences, and that changed me too, because as I started speaking out about it, because people won't, um, the shame lifted, and it was like, okay, this is what I did, and I'm respected, and I'm allowed to be vulnerable, and I'm loved. And see, that's the piece that I think, and it's not about being needy. The shame isn't about being needy. The shame is about, I'm not being loved and respected, and I'm a loser.
Yeah.
And I'm not unloved, and I'm not a loser, and I'm none of those things. But when your head gets down in the sand and you've had as many experiences as I have, then you just kind of go and do the turtle, as we tell the kids, right? And you bring yourself in, and you're this turtle, and you're just shrinking up, and your head's inside your shell.
Yeah.
And what Joe did is she pulled it out and she said, come on, will you let me do this? And I won't expose you. And I said, okay.
Mm.
And it changed everything.
That's amazing. I'm so glad that like you had the trust in her, you had that support, and it really did sound like because yeah, it's so easy to like internalize those things and to just keep spiraling, and you kept having these experiences, and it really sounds like people were supportive and encouraging, and that was able to really tackle that shame. And now you help other people with it, like you
Right.
are
But
becoming an advocate and a supervisor, and like you're using this to help other people.
I couldn't have done that without Joe.
Hmm.
Because, and so what happened then after that, I took your workbook class, which I'm still working on the workbook, but because it just got bigger than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be a simple thing, but it's turned into something really amazing and wonderful.
Yeah.
And I'm speaking on the 23rd for 2 hours to 120 social workers
That's amazing.
virtually that I never would have thought that
Yeah,
I would do. But Joe took it and said, let's just put yourself out there.
yeah,
Let me just do this anonymously for you.
yeah.
And I was like, okay.
And yeah,
So,
and it's really like opened up all these doors for
and
you
it's
now to speak and to help others.
right, but it's opened up the doors because I trusted her to say, you're not a loser, because that's where that's where that shame is just, it's like having an L on your forehead, right?
Yeah.
And like you're in a place and they're saying, so what do you think of yourself? And inside you're like, I'm not very good, what's
Mm.
wrong with me?
Mhm.
And you just shrink down.
Mhm.
And this way, because of what Joe did, I can hold my head up and I
Yeah.
can say to you, I made mistakes.
Well, we're
I
human. We're all gonna make
and I
mistakes.
did things that I'm sorry that I did, but I learned from them.
Mhm.
Like one of the things that, leading back to this, another reason that I got in trouble was because I didn't understand that I shouldn't see a whole family.
Mm.
So I saw the dad first, then I saw the child, then I saw another child, then I saw the mom, and then they got divorced.
Mhm.
And dad got mad.
Mhm.
And um, now, if I'm seeing a child, because I'm not a marriage therapist and I don't want to do that anymore, I will say, I'm sorry, it's unethical for me to see it. I consider that a conflict of interest
Yeah.
because of that whole situation over here.
Yeah.
Because I had to, and then I went back and I looked, and there is an ethical principle in the NASW that
Mhm.
says that you have to be very careful if you're seeing more than one person. Well,
Mhm.
I understood that in a marriage situation. I
Mhm.
understood that in couples, like I'm going to see the couple, but I'm not going to see you separately because there'll be conflict, right? But I didn't think about that in a child situation.
Yeah.
I didn't think about that in, I'm seeing the dad first. He found me and he wants me to put the family together. So I'm seeing you individually and seeing you together. I don't ever do that anymore.
Yeah. Well, I think that's even interesting because, again, like I said earlier, some of these can conflict. And so it makes things really messy. And so, again, like I know ours are different. And so LMFTs have different kind of roundabouts and like different ways that we would express that and handle that. But I'm thinking of small towns. So, what happens for these folks in these really small towns? And you're maybe one of maybe you're the only therapist there, and you get in these situations of they're called dual relationships or conflict of
Mm.
interest type things, and so it's like, well, do I this is before even telehealth. Now I know telehealth does expand a lot of things, but well, we have one ethic saying this and then one ethic saying this, and it's like we can drive ourselves up the wall because it's like, well, what do we do? And we're so scared of getting in trouble.
I mean, I live in this now. Summerville is the seventh largest town in the city, but I moved here in 94, 92, 92. So I know a lot of people
Yeah.
and I've been around a lot. I mean, so there aren't dual relationships that I don't have.
Right.
And I don't say that to be unethical. I mean, I have to be really careful. Like, I had a very hard time finding a church because
Mhm.
I don't want to go to church and we go to Sunday school and I know your story.
Right. I think
and I
that's a
live in a
great
small town.
yeah, I think that's a great point of like that's what I mean when I'm like these ethics aren't as black and white as maybe some of our laws. Like I have a law that says I have to keep my records for 7 years. Okay, that's pretty like I can follow that. Our ethics really just are meant to make us think things through. And so it's not that okay, I can never have a dual relationship, but it's I have to think about how this dual relationship is possibly going to impact these clients, and it slows it down. And so in some ways it's like, ooh, nope, I'm just going to refer out because that's easier. Some of it slows it down and says, okay, well, there's one church in town and I'm the only therapist that specializes in this. It doesn't mean I can't see you, but let's have a conversation about when we're in this situation, this is what it's going to look like. And this is, these boundaries. So, oh, that's just is so messy. And then we no wonder why people get in trouble or are scared or just don't know what the heck to do because this is so complicated.
It is. I mean, when I first started working in private practice, my son was at the local high school. Well, all my kids had been
Yes.
there. And Casey is 6'4", blonde and blue-eyed, and his best friend was dark-skinned and 5'4". And I would say, and I'd go in and say, "Do you know Casey?" And they would go, and because I had to,
Mhm.
and they would say, "I think so." And I'd say, "Well, his best friend is Liam." And they go, "Oh, well, yeah." And I say, "So now you have to decide." And
Mm,
then I would go to a band concert and
mhm.
they would be in band.
Yeah.
And because Casey's raised by a social worker, right? They would say, "Hey, Miss Julie." And I go, "Hi." Casey go, "Oh yeah, I can't know that you know them, right?"
Yeah. Oh my gosh, literally. So
I mean,
I used to live in a smaller town. And so my partner learned to say, like, if anyone waved to me at the Walmart, I'm like, you can't ask me how I know them. Like,
exactly,
and they know. They're
exactly.
like, it could be a coworker, it could also be a client. And so just like, don't ask questions.
Right, exactly. And so, it got difficult at
Mhm.
times.
Oh,
And then
I can
I tried to move towns and I went an hour away and it didn't matter
Yeah.
because this area is so small that
Mhm.
everybody knew me anyway.
Yep. And if you've got
Like,
kids or you're active in church or your community, like that bubble, like just keeps getting larger of those possibilities of running into people that you know. And it's just hard.
it is. And it's so funny because I was talking to somebody last week and I used to work at it's called Palmetto, but it used to be chartered. It's a psychiatric hospital. And she came in and she was working at the current Palmetto. And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I used to work there. And I know all the backstories." And she's like, "Girl, you know all the dirt." Like, here, know.
Yeah.
And you can't go anywhere in this. There's like three big towns where I'm living.
Yeah.
And you can go an hour away and they know us here because
Exactly.
everybody knows everybody.
Yep. Yep. So, oh, folks listening, like if you're stressed about ethics, you're not alone. They're
No.
messy. That's why consultation, supervision. I know some folks who, depending on like if they have a really unique like niche or kind of specialty, they're in lifelong supervision just kind of for that protection. So you're saying like they have that built-in person they can talk to, they can document that, hey, I'm meeting with this person, so you don't have to do this alone. There's no shame in not knowing or not understanding some of these things, but you ask for help, you consult, you try to navigate some of these websites with their messy, lengthy laws, and oh, it's a lot. So you got a speech coming up, and how do
Mhm.
folks? And we're going to post your website so folks, if they want to work with you in the South Carolina area and possibly in the Florida area, they can reach out. But are there other, and will eventually have a workbook coming out, so
I
that will
will
be
have a
very
workbook. I will have a
exciting.
workbook.
But any other like fun things that folks can learn more about ethics or connect with you with?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, Fun in terms of what, Alicia?
Oh, I kind of nerd out over things. Like for me, I like trainings and like learning things. So anything like that, or if you've got any like I don't
Well,
know.
actually, yes. Lisa Due, who you interviewed, is
Mhm.
actually my social work coach.
Mm.
And she is going to be asking me to do a virtual seminar coming up. Um, with some other people regarding ethics and boundaries and that kind of stuff.
I love
Um,
it.
I am just kind of reaching out and seeing who wants to hear my story. My story is kind of gory almost in some ways, but it's good because I rose above it,
Mhm.
and because I had to understand that people react to what happens to you out of hurt.
Mhm.
So when you make a mistake that you don't think is that big, or you do something
Mhm.
that they don't understand, um, that it's not really about you.
Yeah.
It's about the hurt that they've received. And I hadn't even thought about that before right now, but putting that together, if you can go into it knowing that, then you can reach out and kind of fix what you're trying to accomplish. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Oh, 1,000%.
But yeah, I am going to Lisa's doing a clinician connection, her very first, I'm putting a plug for her. Her
Yes.
very first conference is April, it's Thursday and Friday. I think it's April 17th and 18th, in Virginia, at Virginia
Oh,
Beach. He
yeah.
has a hypnotist coming for the comedy. And if you have a spouse or somebody coming with you, they can pay $20 to see him. Um, and the conference is being held on the beach at the Hilton Inn,
Very
and I am
cool.
attending.
Yay.
But she and her partner, Chris Conley, are putting this on, and this is her first um, ever, ever conference,
That's
and it's 2
awesome.
days. And there are CEUs. She has gotten CEUs for the NCC.
Yeah, very cool. I
So
don't know when this one will air, possibly by then. If not, I know her podcast is already up.
yeah.
So if you haven't listened to that yet, make sure to go listen to that one. And then it has all her info on it. So folks can stay connected with her, hopefully that way. And then I guess just to wrap things up, the thing that I like to ask everyone is, how have you been practicing authenticity lately?
So I'm very real. My clients, they come in and I tell them, okay, I was born in New York and I'm raised in New Jersey. Like, okay.
I love
Um,
it.
when I first moved to South Carolina, somebody said to me, you're gonna have to lose the Jersey attitude.
Oh, heck no. We
And
embrace it.
I I didn't lose it. I tell it like it is. And if my clients want you to dance or be, and there's some therapists that are like this, I'm just not me. Well, if that's what you think, do that. I'm like, girl, do you think this is going to work for you? I mean, that's much more my attitude, right?
But
And
some
they're like,
people need that, right? And like they like that. I've had clients be like, I just want someone to tell it as it is, call me out on my BS. And I'm like, oh, yes, this is my fave. So yeah, some people want the softer therapist. I'm glad they're out there. I think people want your spice though.
some people do. And it's really funny. I have this lady who's 72. I mean, she's a little tiny fireball, but when I first met her, she 72, and she said, and she was working, and she's like, Julie, I just need somebody who doesn't confront me. And I went, okay. I said, I am not that person.
Like I'll do it gently, but like I'm gonna call you out. It's out
And
of love.
I said, right. And I said, I just can't do that. And she said, well, I had a a employer who just didn't make me feel good about myself. And I said, okay, so I talked to her and I said, is that really related to how he talked to you, or is it what he was saying? And she said, I kind of like your spice. It's exactly
Yeah.
what she said. She said, I want to work with you. It
Yeah.
has been the most, for us, wonderful relationship.
Mm.
She has a husband who has Lewy body dementia and was in the Navy and played the piano. And I don't know if you know any of the research about music and how it hits the part of the brain of somebody who has
Hmm.
dementia, that there are videos on YouTube about women and men. One woman was the prima ballerina, and she's all constricted now, but you play her music and she dances,
Hmm.
like even
That's
within her
beautiful.
movement. And so we got him playing the piano, and he doesn't play it a lot anymore, but he played the piano in the Navy band. And so she started down and started playing with him. And because we had similar interests and found that diet affected how his brain works and the piano affects his, she talks to me now once a month instead of every week.
That's awesome.
And we have this great relationship. But she said, I really needed somebody who could tell me what I needed to do. So
Mhm.
you're right. But sometimes I have to present it that way, but she was willing to listen, right?
Yeah. Well, it also
Because
would have been really, maybe not easy, but like you could have also have said, okay, I just won't, I'll dim this side of myself. I'll give you what you think you need. But then you wouldn't have had the amazing relationship that you have now. So it's like because you were authentic and true, and it ended up being this really powerful thing that you got to connect with this
yeah.
person about. And like that's wonderful. So like it's a great example. Thank you for sharing that one.
Well, it's really hard for me to dim myself, as you put it, because I could do it for a period of time, and then I'll get passionate and I'll be like, all right.
Well, we don't need to dim anything here. We are all about the authenticity. So thank you so much, Julie, for
Well,
sharing
thank
some
you.
of your
This is
story.
fun.
Yes, this is a great combo and sounds like you're going to have a couple other speaking opportunities. And so folks
Oh,
can follow along and just hear more. Because I know this is just like the tip of the iceberg on your story. I know you have a lot to share. You're very passionate about this. You have a lot of knowledge about this. So thank you for just giving those little snippets. And just, yeah, thank you for chatting with us today.
thank you for letting me come.
Of course. Well, folks, until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. And remember that the world needs the real you. So let's explore that authenticity together.